So in this segment, we'll be talking about standardizing processes for clinical and translational research studies. In previous videos, we've talked about the importance when planning a good data collection strategy of writing standard operating procedures, having those available for all of the staff, having them available later for documentation and for referral back to methods that were used in the study. But we left it at a very high level. In this particular segment, we're going to go a little bit deeper, and we're going to dig down into a little bit of detail on the best principles in terms of thinking about standard operating procedures, what they are, how to sort of think about putting those together, different topic areas that might be of interest for you when you're creating a standard set of standardized operating procedures or SOPs, and then a little bit more on where to go for more information. You'll find that this is a topic where there's a lot of information, there's a lot of documentation out there on the web that you can use. We're not going to go into it at the 5-foot level in this course because we are doing data management here, but we will sort of cover it a little bit deeper than before because there's some things that at least data managers and people working on data management plans need to be very cognizant of in an overall or a global sense as they're planning out studies. So before I get into the content, I want to give thanks and acknowledgement to a great colleague of mine, Bree Burks. My team, we do a lot of data coordinating center work. We of course follow SOPs and standards in managing data, but Bree supervises actual clinical operations in units here at the Vanderbilt Hospital. And so I went to her for advice on best practices in terms of creating global plans for creating SOPs and the documentation that we will be covering in this segment. She couldn't be with us for this video shoot, but many of the ideas and much of the material comes directly from her. So the first thing that's important is defining your project. So what is the main priority for your project? What outcomes are you trying to achieve? So even before we start the SOP creation and thought process, making sure that we're defining the scope and looking correctly at the different elements and parameters of the study itself. And again, we've talked a lot about that from the data management standpoint. But here we're talking about it mainly from the overall study, maybe what the PI and the study coordinators might be looking at. So making sure that you are cognizant of the main priority of the projects and you're really looking hard at the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Sort of along those lines, what are the general short and long-term goals for the study, and particularly are they measurable? Who are the key study personnel that are involved in the project? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And how are you going to align things so that they're doing, that you're playing to those strengths and designing away from those weaknesses? What are the priorities for each person involved? What are the short-term tasks that they'll be managing? What are the project metrics that matter? This kind of relates back to that first bullet point, but again, making sure that even from not maybe the study endpoints, but the operational metrics that will tell you as a coordination team whether things are going well and on schedule, or maybe whether they're slipping a bit. So basically trying to come up with things up front on the project metrics side that are going to help make sure that the management of that project is right on track downstream. And finally, assessing and defining realistic timelines and remaining focused on those priorities. As a part of all of that, it's really important to think way up front about creating written standards or again, SOPs, standard operating procedures, because these are going to increase your chance for success. They will enhance compliance. As we've said before, they will also allow you to train and bring on new staff much quicker, because things are already in place, they're already standardized, and they're already well documented. You won't have to sort of rely on institutional memory as you pass things off. In particular for long studies, you're going to need those to sort of look back on to make sure that as you're doing your analysis that things were done appropriately, or they were done as expected. As well, from a compliance standpoint, when people come to see whether you're doing the right thing. You've got everything laid out there in the right place, in the right order, and it just makes those types of audits or checks for consistency much better. So let's talk a little bit about SOPs. SOPs are defined as detailed written instructions to achieve uniformity of the performance of a specific function. And this comes directly from the ICH, or the International Conference on Harmonization, with a reference given there below on this slide. Some of the procedural things to consider when thinking about creating and maintaining SOPs for a study or even for a group are that they are essential in defining the operations and the technical components for the study. They really force creating SOPs up front, really force study planners to identify the potential roadblocks and think through every aspect of the study so that there are no surprises downstream. So you're able to proactively develop and deploy solutions before you actually run into the problems. And sort of related to that training comment from just a slide or two ago, SOPs really hold the personnel working on the projects accountable. They provide that measuring stick. SOPs provide a level of transparency, so especially when there are compliance components, when you're working on studies where you're submitting data to other agencies or centralized authorities. Having SOPs is absolutely essential. It will be part of the contract. It will be part of the work, the scope of work that you have to comply with. And again, it just creates this level of transparency and enhances trust that your group is working on projects where they know what they're doing. SOPs are a best practice for many different services and groups. And again, depending on the type of work that you're doing, SOPs are often an expectation or a requirement for the study or trial. So, again, with the help of my colleague Bree Burke, we kind of took a look at this and sort of pulled together some SOP creation principles that are maybe good to think about when going through this process. First, best principle there would be start with a standardized template. So don't reinvent the wheel. If you can find something that's pretty close or along the same lines in conceptual model and framework, even sort of finding a template to sort of pattern your recipe or formatting on as you create the sort of standardized template for SOPs. It's a good idea. Don't reinvent the wheel. Number two, define your workflow, and we've talked a little bit about that before, about sort of making sure that you're thinking about all of the procedural elements that are going to go into each step of the study operations. Making sure that those are designed well and designed with purpose is going to is really going to make the creation of the SOPs much better and faster. Finally, use a broad approach and create SOPs that apply to multiple projects whenever possible. Again, think about the fact that your group or your team is probably not going to be working on one project and then retiring, but hopefully you can sort of reuse at least much of the material across many projects. And some of the SOPs that you'll create for procedures and processes in your laboratories or in your nursing units or in your data coordinating centers, that they're going to be consistent and can be reused verbatim from study to study. So take a broad view of this and don't try to get terribly specific around a single project. Don't back yourself into a compliance corner by being too specific or setting standards that are not realistic. It's really easy to create words in a Word document, but you have to really think, and those words look really good in terms of the recipe or the way things are going to be done. But don't forget that you're actually going to have to comply with these standard operating procedures once they're written and once they're out there. So be careful and sort of balance between being very specific versus being too loose. You want to sort of strike that balance, but definitely don't put yourself in a corner by making them too restrictive or more restrictive than you have to. SOPs should be self-explanatory, standalone documents. So again, you should be able to hand these to someone and have them read them, and they should be able to understand what's done in this particular component of the trial or study or in this laboratory procedure, et cetera. And without a lot of coaching and hand-holding. So again, they make really good training materials for the staff in addition to being something that needs to be done from a compliance standpoint. Finally, on this slide, it's important to think of the SOPs as fluid documents, and they should reflect changing processes. So, things happen. You get different equipment, or you sort of learn things along the way, and we'll talk about some of this in the data center operations a little bit later in the course on mid-study data collection principles and guidelines. But things happen across the study and across teams and across labs, and so you need to be careful and make sure that you don't write these SOPs and just throw them in a corner, but make sure that you understand that they're sort of living documents, if you will, and they will need to be updated and evolved. There's some care and feeding of those if you want to have them remain relevant, and you do want them to remain relevant. It takes time. And much like some of the other principles that we've talked about in this course related to, time invested up front pays off big downstream. This is especially important in SOP development and maintenance. It does take time, and what we found is that you underestimate or you rush those SOPs, and you may be able to sort of have the document that you wanted today, but really they have no value if you're not taking the time to put into them what needs to be there, and sort of thinking about some of these principles and doing them right. Justifying unique processes or workflow practices to an external entity requires SOPs, and again, we talked about that before in terms of maybe providing documentation or evidence of proof as you're putting in a grant proposal or a contract proposal, or maybe even working with an agency as they come in audit processes. You're going to need to have these SOPs, and especially where you've got unique processes and workflows, you will need and you will use these SOPs. And then finally, in this principles section, the fact is you're not just creating documents, you're creating processes and procedures that people are going to be expected to follow. And so it's important that the project manager and all staff be familiar and sign off on all applicable SOPs in their work areas. So a few sort of general topic areas where standard operating procedures might fall would be administrative domain, clinical procedures and workflows, data management, of course, how you're doing things on the data management side, and that's particularly relevant in this course. Laboratory, pharmacy. I got these broad topics off of a website from the Duke Global Health Institute, and would recommend, as sort of a next step, hitting that site. You'll see a lot of granularity on the types of SOPs that fall under those broad categories. Similarly, the University of California, San Francisco has an excellent site that details some of their SOP domain areas. A little bit different type of framing or bookkeeping here, but you see a long list of types of SOPs that are often used in clinical studies and trials. So we're going to kind of stop the intermediate dive, I guess, into SOP creation and standardizing processes here. Like so many of the topics that we're covering, this could very well be, and often is, I think, sort of a course or workshop topic in itself, or maybe even multiple workshops and courses if you drill down into the specific domains where SOPs are created. But we'll kind of stop here at this level because this is a data management course in and of itself. Hopefully this introductory material will at least give individuals a working knowledge of sort of what goes into thinking about the SOPs that go across the whole study. There are many online resources for learning and seeing examples of SOPs. Probably the best way to go about next steps would be to just do a Google search or a general web search on research SOP, and you'll find many examples. Many organizations will put their SOPs right out there on the web for individuals to sort of download and see, and so there are great number of resources there in terms of taking next steps. So this concludes this segment, and I think we've at least sort of done that cursory or working knowledge view of SOPs, and we'll pick it up with the next segment.